Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the absolute powerhouse of India's economy, its banking sector. This is the engine that's fueling a trillion-dollar growth story. We're going to look at its incredible expansion, but also some of the serious cracks that have appeared along the way, and what it all means for the future. So, what is banking really? Well, at its heart, it's basically this brilliant idea of financial matchmaking. Just think about it. You've got people with savings over here and people with amazing ideas over there. Banks are the ones who connect them, turning all that idle cash into active capital that can actually build something. Okay, so that sounds simple enough, right? But how does that one simple act become the absolute engine for a trillion-dollar economy? I mean, we're talking about one of the fastest growing economies on the planet. And that's the big question we're going to dig into. All right, so let's jump right in. We're going to look at why banks are really at the heart of India's entire financial system. If you look at a lot of Western economies, the capital markets, the stock market, are kind of the star of the show. But in India, nope, it's the banks. They are the main event. We're talking about the number one source of cash for pretty much everything, from agriculture and industry to the service sector. And that makes them absolutely crucial. Okay, so this modern engine we see today, it definitely didn't just appear overnight. Its story is really a century of incredible change. And what a journey it's been. I mean, just look at this timeline. It all started with the institutional foundations laid back during British rule. Then, after 1947, a huge shift. Banks were nationalized, really put to work to serve the country's development goals. Fast forward to 1991, and boom, the big liberalization reforms hit, bringing in competition and a new focus on efficiency. And then came the 2010s and the digital revolution, which just turned everything on its head. All right, now let's zoom in on a really fascinating period, what the study calls the Great Indian Growth Story. We're talking about a decade of just unprecedented expansion. And when you look at the numbers, they're just wow. There was this absolutely massive surge in deposits. And you have to understand, this isn't just a number on a chart. This represents a huge mobilization of the nation's savings, a real sign of growing trust from millions and millions of people in the formal banking system. And here's the best part. That money did not just sit in a vault somewhere. You can see it right here. The banks put it to work. They channeled all those savings right back into the economy as loans or credit. We're talking about a huge increase in lending that fueled all sorts of development. This is that economic engine we were talking about, firing on all cylinders. But this decade wasn't just about size. It was about innovation. I mean, think about the massive expansion of digital platforms like UPI. This wasn't just a small change, it was a revolution. At the same time, you had this huge push for financial inclusion with programs like the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana or PMJDY. This was a monumental effort to bring millions of people into the formal banking system for the very first time. Okay, so we've seen this incredible growth story, but it's not the whole picture. There was a crisis brewing just under the surface. Let's talk about when good loans go bad. So this naturally leads to a really important question, right? Is all growth good growth? When you're expanding that fast, you have to wonder about the quality of the credit that's being handed out. And that brings us to the main villain of this story, something called non-performing assets, or NPAs. So what are they? Well, to put it simply, these are the loans that have gone bad. The borrower, for whatever reason, has stopped making their payments. They've defaulted. So what the research shows is this really persistent challenge of rising NPAs. As you can see, it was a pretty big problem. And these NPAs, they act like a massive clog in that economic engine we've been talking about. They just gum up the works. When a bank has too many bad loans on its books, it can't lend out new money, and that really threatens the stability of the whole sector. And it's interesting because the study highlights this key dynamic in the system. You've got two different kinds of banks playing the game. On one side, you have the public sector banks, whose job is often to expand outreach and meet social objectives. On the other side, you have the private sector banks, and their focus is much more on efficiency and service quality. It's a real trade-off, and you can imagine it creates a tricky balancing act. And hey, it's not just about NPAs. The sector is facing a bunch of other persistent challenges too. We're talking about things like banking frauds, some pretty serious governance failures, and of course, the ever-present threat of cyber risks in our digital world. And a lot of this boils down to weaknesses in something called credit risk management. which really is just the basic job of figuring out if someone is a good bet to lend money to in the first place.
Okay, so with all these challenges on the table, what's the path forward? How do we forge a stronger, more resilient system for the future?
The study lays out some pretty clear policy recommendations. Step 1, you have to enhance credit risk management, basically get better at the fundamentals of lending. Step 2, strengthen the governance and the regulatory oversight. You need a strong referee. Step 3, and this is a big one, invest in technology to fight back against those cyber risks. And finally, step 4, improve operational efficiency across the board for all banks. And that really brings us to the core conclusion of the research. It says, the research concludes with findings and policy suggestions aimed at enhancing the stability, sustainability, and inclusiveness of the Indian banking system. So, you see, the big takeaway here isn't just about growth for growth's sake. The real goal is healthy, sustainable, and inclusive growth that actually benefits everyone. So, what does all of this mean for you? Well, it matters. A lot. A stable and efficient banking sector means your savings are more secure. It means there's better access to loans when you want to buy a home or start a business, and ultimately, it's the foundation for a stronger national economy for all of us. And this leaves us with one final big question. As game-changing technologies like fintech and AI start to disrupt finance all over the globe, can India's banking engine be upgraded once again to lead in the 21st century? It's been through so much transformation already, but the journey, well, it is far from over.